Welcome to Choreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey, and this is our mid-season catch-up for the 2024-25 season. So we're smack dab in the middle of it. The Grand Prix is over. A bunch of nationals have happened. A bunch more big important things are coming up yet. And that's as much as I know about what we're talking about today.
Yes, because first off, happy 2025 to all. Hope you're doing okay and living in the existential dread with us.
Or the snowy snowpocalypse landscape that we live in right now. Because we are currently buried in our suburban home under about 8 to 10 inches of snow and roads that haven't been plowed yet. So we've been kind of cozily locked inside for the last few days.
I'm grateful for that, honestly. It's been nice.
Yeah. It's nice to hunker down for a little while. And it may seem like we've hunkered down for longer since we intended to post this episode kind of immediately after the Grand Prix Final recap. And then your work and the holiday and friends and family and all those things just kind of wiped out the next few weeks. There was skating happening, just nothing kind of here in the States. And a lot of stuff that we really couldn't see or could only see sort of piecemeal. So a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about are things that have happened over the last few weeks that we have scores for, we have news for, but a lot of it we really didn't see much of. So we're kind of looking at how nationals and some other things shook out just to kind of get a sense of where we're at in the season right now.
Yeah, redefining the landscape for the next quarter, essentially, of competitions that we're about to see.
Yeah. I did something in preparation for this just to get my headspace back around skating because honestly, I just hadn't even thought too much about it for a couple of weeks because I've been so occupied with other things. And so this morning, for the first time, I actually listened to the run-through with Adam Rippon and Ashley Wagner.
I love that show.
And not Olympic gold medalist Sarah Hughes. And I was struck by two things as I was listening to it. Because again, first time. One is that they use way more music and sound effects than I would have expected.
That's Adam.
No,
He's very heavy on the production.
Yes. And two, that they are focused on very different things than we are. Their takeaways were very, very different. And I get that the vibe of their show is very different from ours, from what I can kind of,
They swear a lot more too, which I enjoy.
Yeah. Actually, there's something about like Ashley Wagner being one of my favorite skaters of all time, being as sweary as she is, I find very entertaining. But yeah, their recap of 2025 really hit on a lot of things I either didn't notice or didn't really matter very much. And again, it was very much for entertainment, Yeah, it was definitely a different kind of experience. So that helped me not at all in preparation.
I haven't listened to their 2024 wrap up. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's funny.
I need to catch up. The last episode I listened to was Adam Rippon by himself on an episode going through the long list of why he doesn't like the ISU's new website. And that episode I highly recommend. It has very little to do with figure skating, lots to do with really bad fonts and photography and how many mistakes they have made in the process of setting that up.
Yeah, the US Fed's website is terrible. Yeah, they mentioned some of that in their year-end thing as well. And,
it's unfortunate.
That was a place where I had very similar complaints. So I was like, I feel that for sure. But let's move away from skating podcast inception and we'll just dive in. I mean, this is going to be probably fairly brief as we kind of just...
Well, we're just running through some stuff, not to take their name. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. We're just going down. Let's start with Japanese nationals.
Japanese nationals, right. So, the running joke is that women's Japanese nationals already happened at the Grand Prix Final and that Amber Glenn won it. Which all of us have been kind of making that, sort of commentary. It was pretty funny. But so for really real Japanese nationals happened. And this is the most stacked of any of the individual nations.
Oh, for sure. At least in the singles competition, for absolute sure.
Yeah. And some really surprising things happened here, particularly in the men's division.
To no one's surprise, Yuma Kagiyama took his first Japanese national title. It's weird to even say that out loud, that it's his first national title, but then you think about before him was Shoma and before him was Yuzuru Hanyu. So yeah, he did great, particularly his free skate. I have not seen, sadly, but I heard it was marvelous. So a 297.73, phenomenal scorer, phenomenal skater. Him getting his first national title is wonderful to see.
But didn't break 300 at his own federation's nationals. Although I think in general, the Japanese nationals don't tend to be as score inflating as what you see at some other regional events.
No, not quite as much, no. But I thought what was interesting was Rio Nakata taking silver here. Not that Rio hasn't been completely showing up in the juniors in a way where you know he's ideally going to be emerging as a star for the next 10 years going into seniors. But yeah, him taking it ahead of quite a hefty group below him, which I think in large part, was due to mistakes from people like Shun Sato and Kalmura.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real significant story here is that the people that you would have expected to have done really well at this event really crumbled under pressure. This whole season, the question has always been, what 3 men will Japan send to Worlds? And this is a federation that takes their nationals very seriously, and it has a huge impact on who they send to Worlds and who they send to 4 continents. And they don't ride on who are the more veteran competitors or who are the bigger names. They'll send who performed.
Yes.
And that really impacted their world team choices, because when we look through this lineup, like you said, you had Rio Nakata, who has been really strong on the junior circuit and is a terrific skater. But, notably, if you look at the point spread here, he's 34 points back from Yuma.
Yeah.
So, there's a big gap between first and second. And normally you'd expect an event that also included Shun Sato, Kalmura, Sota Yamamoto, Kashira Shimada, and Kazuki Tomono to have been a lot tighter, particularly from Shun and Kao. And that just did not happen here, because the top 4, number 3 was Tatsuya Tsuboi, who is a great skater, but not typically somebody who you think of in those higher ranks. And that placement got him onto the world team. And then in 4th was Nobunari Oda, who I believe is in his late 30s.
Yes, which is phenomenal.
In
I
his
love it.
Basically final appearance, final competitive performance, came out here and got 4th at nationals.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of amazing. Now, if we're talking scores, you're going to see Tsuboi in there with a 247.31, not super competitive amongst the top ranks of the world stage. But the way the men have been menning this season,
anything is possible.
Yeah.
And remember, Tsuboi had a really good showing in the Grand Prix as well.
Yeah.
So him being on the world team doesn't feel out of line. I feel like he's been coming up in the ranks in Japan. There's just many people that I would have put ahead of him based on expectations. But, hey, that, like you said, Japan is very much the nationals matters a lot. And he's been consistent throughout the season, unlike some of their higher scoring potential men.
Yeah. A nice performance from Kazuki Tomono here, though, to show up in 5th place. Again, 233.95 isn't extraordinary by any means, but he's had a really uneven couple of seasons. So to see him place that highly is pretty awesome.
I'm hoping that gets better next season, too. And he is on the 4 continents team, at least. So I'm excited to get at least one more big competition from him this year.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Tsuboi got the nod for both worlds and 4 continents.
I think that's really smart, because Tsuboi, like you said, is not as well known as a lot of the other Japanese men here. So putting him at 4 continents to get that extra little bit of experience ahead of Worlds, I think is actually really smart.
Yeah, but when you get further down this podium, you have a 7th place finish from Shun Sato. Oof. After doing really well on the Grand Prix. This is a 230.80. This is really, really disappointing for him.
This, of everything in this men's competition, this was the biggest shock for sure. Shun Sato, I think, was everyone's pick for the 2nd spot, a clear winner for a world spot. He was on the Grand Prix Final podium, so it really does feel weird. But he has said that this is the worst competition of his senior career. This was just a complete meltdown at the exact wrong time. That said, his performance and strength throughout the season so far did get him a world nod, which I'm very grateful for, because Shun hasn't been to Worlds yet and deserves that experience. Just because he had a bad nationals, I would be heartbroken for him if he hadn't made that team.
I am really sad to see Kalmura here in 8th. from what it looks like in the points, he was really let down again by that free skate. That has just not worked on him this season, and it's a shame to get this far into the season and have that continue to bring him down. He did get the nod for Four Continents, and it is worth noting that Kawamura is a Four Continents champion.
Yes.
So that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, obviously it's not Worlds, and we know that's what he was really gunning for, but he has done very well at the Four Continents event previously. When he won it, it was in miraculous fashion. So that could be a good turning point for him, I hope. And then further down, you see Koshiro Shimada in 9th, and then a 10th place finish from Sota Yamamoto, who, again,
it just hasn't been his year.
It hasn't been. And it's sad because he's really tried to do some very different stuff from him. I always think of Sota as a very rock and roll skater, and he's been doing more vulnerable, quieter pieces, I think, to kind of display that he's capable of doing other stuff, but it's had diminishing returns all season. So the world team ends up being Yuma Kagiyama, Shun Sato, and Tatsuya Tsuboi. And then Four Continents team is Kawamura, Kazuki Tomono, and Tatsuya Tsuboi. Not the team lineups that I really would have been expecting, but hopefully it works out for them.
In the women's competition, I think it shook out mostly how at least I would have expected at this point. Kaori Sakamoto shook off I don't know even what to call it, from the Grand Prix Final, that it didn't quite work for her there. It worked for her here, and she landed in first with a 2:28.68. So she's doing fine.
Yeah, that's a pretty commanding performance there.
Yes. And as you'd expect, she is on the world team and will be shooting for her 4th straight world title. And I am excited to see that showdown between her and Amber. I'm hoping, because I'm assuming Amber will be there. I'm getting ahead of myself.
I mean, anything can happen, but yeah, it feels like it'll be a rematch. Yeah.
Yes, which is fun. And then Mao Shimada taking silver with a 2:19. Mega good score. Not surprising from Mao Shimada. Her coming in again with that silver medal, everybody is just sort of holding their breath until she moves into seniors. But for now, she's the queen of juniors and looks to be continuing to do that for some time.
There's definitely a lot left in the tank there before she hits seniors. So we'll see if that success carries over, because sometimes it doesn't. It feels like she's just been dominating juniors for so long.
I know. She feels like someone we know so well now, and it's like she's not even in senior competition yet. It's wild.
But continuing in a very good season for her, Wakaba Higuchi comes in third here, gets a 2:06.40, lands herself on the world team along with Kaori. It's been a brilliant comeback is the obvious term, but I feel like when you have a comeback and a glow up at the same time, which is how I feel like Wakaba's been having it. It's just such a brilliant season. It's been so fun to watch. Of course, seeing her and her bestie Kaori living their best life on podiums together is also crazy fun. I'm thrilled for her. So I think that's super exciting. She also got the nod for Four Continents, which is pretty interesting. So
more Wakaba. That's all I'm here for.
Yeah.
I read a quote from her where she really was wondering if she had peaked and it was over. Like going into nationals, she really just sort of felt like, well, I just don't even know what to expect anymore. And then she not only makes the podium, but makes both of those teams. And it's just so great to see, especially in the year before the Olympics, having this surge is just phenomenal. But also making the world team, I think to no one's surprise, but coming in 4th here, Mona Chiba. I would have probably on paper thought Mona Chiba would have come in a bit ahead of Wakaba.
It was very close.
It was very close.
Less than a point.
Mona had a few more problems in her free skate, so therefore dropped below. That said, is also on the world team and the Four Continents team. Will be a hefty competitor in both of those. One of the favorites going in for sure. And still like a 2:05.69 in 4th place would still have won a ton of the other competitions this season. It's just that Japan Nationals is kind of a big thing.
Mona Chiba going into Four Continents really places her as a strong competitor for the top of that podium.
Absolutely.
We don't know what that full lineup is yet, but obviously Wakaba being there is a big deal too. But Mona is kind of the one I would think is the biggest threat going into that one.
I can't argue that.
Yeah. And a nice showing from Rino Matsuike, who came in 5th here and got the nod for Four Continents as well. So we get to see more of Rino, which is super exciting. She's been lovely all season. Unfortunately, we see some of our favorites like Rinka Watanabe, Ryan Sumiyoshi, Hano Yoshida, and Yuna Aoki further down this podium. Particularly looking at Hano Yoshida landing in 11th here is shocking.
And the thing is, it's still a 19527, which still would have won several competitions.
Oh, yeah.
This year.
I'm speaking relatively speaking. I mean, she
Relatively
was 13th
speaking here, yes.
in the free skate, right?
Yeah.
For Hano Yoshida, who is such a terrific skater,
yes,
she really should have done better. So yes, I mean, numerically 195 would have won Skate America this season and put her in 11th at Japanese Nationals, right? So perspective, right? It's all relatively speaking.
The thing that actually coming out of the women's competition that made me the saddest, if not surprised at all, was Yuna Aoki's retirement right after it.
Oh, yeah, that broke my heart. I'm not surprised.
No.
It still broke my heart.
And I appreciate, and she even said, like, I don't want to hate the sport. She stuck around for another year, ended up getting to go to Grand Prix, which she hadn't gotten to do as a senior. She even just got to enjoy herself on the circuit a bit more. And I'm thrilled for her, but sad for all of us that don't get to see her at them next season.
I would love Yuna Aoki to be one of those people who makes her way to the show circuit and that we would actually get to see more often. She just isn't a big enough name internationally, I fear, to be able to make that happen. But she is divine, and I really hope that we see a next career step for her in choreography.
I hope so too. She's very good at that, and I hope we see lots of programs choreographed by Yuna Aoki.
Yeah. Japanese Nationals didn't have very significant pairs or ice dance competitions. They just don't have many people in those disciplines. So Rika Miura and Ryuichi Kihara walked away with the pairs event and the world's nod. And then dance this year, after the retirement from last season from Masato Kumatsubara and Tim Coletto, they didn't really have sort of a marquee ice dance team. So this has been some of those new teams that were kind of vying for that space. So Yoshida and Morita are the nod for Worlds here.
And they're a fun team.
They are a fun team. I've really liked seeing them on the come up. I don't expect them to be very competitive on the world stage, but they are a very, very fun team. They've got a great coaching team, and they're a very young team. So I said team way too many times, but I think they're definitely ones to watch, but they're like a next quadrennial kind of team.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about French Nationals, which also happened kind of in the last few weeks. And I was just really excited to see that Kevin Amos won the men's competition. To be fair, Adams Joachim Fa was still not competitive yet, so he withdrew from French Nationals, and he will be on the Europeans team. I don't think they've named their world team yet, but I'm assuming he will also be on that. Still, Kevin Amos got a 264.08. That's not bad. And while his performances were not perfect, they were strong. And after the disaster of French Nationals last year, which is genuinely one of the kind of scariest and saddest performances I've ever seen from a skater, period. Him coming here and winning, I'm so delighted for Kevin Amos more than anything.
Yeah, it's such a great turnabout. I think that when Kevin writes his inevitable skating memoir,
I'm already pre-ordered.
Yeah.
Like, trust me.
To have it go from one season, have the worst event of your life at nationals, and then to be the national champion the next season is a pretty brilliant storyline. Regardless of what happens with Kevin going forward, this whole season has been such a redemption arc. We love to see it. And
a consistent redemption arc. None of it feels flukish. It all feels like he has just come back into his own and come out the other side happier as a person. That's the most important part.
Yeah. Like you said, Adam Fa wasn't here again. He is still recovering from injury. He is posting videos of him throwing quads and stuff again. So he's bringing it back together. So he will represent France in Euros. I'm sure he'll go to Worlds as long as that ankle holds.
As long as he's healthy. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. It's hard to even gauge what he's looked like this whole season so far, just because he's been so on and off because of that injury. It's hard to even remember his programs because we just haven't seen them enough. Yeah. So I almost feel like it's a fresh start for him.
And then, no surprise, Lapareva and Brosseau win it for ice dance and will be on the world team. They've also had a pretty strong come up this season. I feel like way more people are talking about them now.
Love.
Makes me so happy. I love this team. I love their programs. Very exciting. For pairs, it's Kovalev and Kovalev. It's really, they're the top line of what the French have in pairs, but they are not really competitive on the world stage.
No.
So I wouldn't expect a whole lot. I feel like this is a team that is just kind of hanging on.
To get to the next Olympics is sort of how I feel.
Yeah, I feel like if there was not an Olympics looming and if there were any better teams there, I feel like this team would have already retired. They feel like they're kind of at the end of their particular story in
Unfortunately, yeah. But I do feel like France needs them for the Olympic team.
Yes.
So I do feel like they're going to stick it out at least another year.
For sure.
And then the women's title was won by Stefania Gladky, who's a Russian expat who is now representing France and is 14 years old. So
those Russians.
She's French. Remember, she's French.
Well, I'm quoting the end of La River and Brosseau's short program.
But she will obviously, because she is 14, not be representing at Euros or at
Thank
Worlds.
Goodness.
Yes. So Leah Serna and Lauren Schild will be representing France.
Yeah, I think Schild actually had to pull out of nationals, so she didn't get to compete at it.
But she was named to the Europeans.
Yeah. Leah Serna is a terrific skater who has not had a very good season. So we'll see how that pans out.
Well, let's talk about Italian nationals. We're staying in Europe for at least a little bit longer.
Now, if you want to talk about the nation that actually has a real team shot.
They do. They really do.
There's a lot of, unlike a few of these other nations that have been really strong in a couple of disciplines and weak in others, Italy is much more balanced, a much more complete country team.
And their women's competition is coming up because that's the weakest part. But then you have, Larnaki Gutman taking a Grand Prix medal this season, and then Anna Pizzetta taking the title here, beating Lara by 14 points. So it's like you're starting to see a little come up there. And I mean, you can't tell me Italy's not freaking thrilled because they have so much strength in all of the other disciplines. And with a home country Olympics, they not only want a medal, but they don't want a bronze. And I think beating Japan, period, is going to be hard. The U.S. obviously is going to be very hard to beat. So we'll see, but they're up there.
No surprises here for Guindard and Fabry. Definitely one of the best ice dance teams in the world, carrying the banner for Italy. Conti and Machi in pairs. Again, such a strong season for these two.
Yeah.
They came in 33 points ahead of Ghiardi and Ambrosini.
Yeah. Massive win for them.
To be honest, I wasn't expecting a whole lot from them this season. I was so expecting Ghiardi and Ambrosini, and then also Beccari and Guarisi, who have just pretty much been a non-factor this season because of injury.
Yeah.
But I really thought those other two teams were going to kind of surge past Conti and Machi, and I was absolutely incorrect about that. This team has come back so strong, so effectively.
I think they're better than they were before.
I agree. Yeah. I think that the new material helps them out a lot.
Tons.
And yeah, they've been doing very well. Ghiardi and Ambrosini just haven't been as strong this season as I would like to see. It has kind of felt like a step back for them. And again, unfortunately, with Beccari and Guarisi, who are a team that I really came to enjoy over the last couple of seasons, and just like a number of people this season have just kind of been on the DL the whole time. You know, when you look at across a number of different disciplines and countries, some pretty notable competitors who we have just not seen at all this season. Now, getting healthy in preparation for an Olympic season is pretty darn important.
Yeah.
But it's also a shame to completely lose momentum like that.
Yes. The men's competition, I think, was pretty interesting. I don't think after the season we've seen from him, Daniel Grassel taking the title is surprising at all. But I think it's interesting that Nikolai Memola took silver only about 12 points behind Grassel, which isn't bad because Memola's had kind of an up and down season. He's either brilliant or not at all.
Memola has been the definition of menning. Every competition he goes into, he usually has one program that's really strong and one that's a total mess. Usually the short program is completely collapsed on him.
Yeah.
So to see him perform better here is definitely nice.
Yeah, Memola and Grassel will be at Europeans. I don't think they've announced their world team yet. But in third was Frangipani and fourth, Matteo Rizzo. But Rizzo is getting the Euro spot over Frangipani, which I thought was interesting. Frangipani is actually the sub for Europeans.
Feels like kind of an odd choice. I mean, I adore Rizzo, but he is running on old programs and has not been performing super well this season.
But he tends to perform really well at Europeans.
Yeah, he's pretty clutch. And Frangipani is definitely not super competitive on the world stage.
He's also been a little bit more erratic this season. Like he's had nice highs, but very low lows.
Yeah, I like Frangipani's programs a lot, but I thought he was more impressive in the early Challenger series than he was once he got onto the Grand Prix. So yeah, Rizzo's more the clutch hitter when it comes to this kind of situation, but he's not had a strong enough season to feel like he's going to be hyper competitive.
And I kind of feel like with the point spread between the two of them at Nationals was pretty significant, and Frangipani taking third there, to me, even though he hasn't had the best season. Again, I didn't watch these competitions, so to be fair, I don't know really outside of the points what occurred, and there wasn't enough information I could find to know, but I am a little surprised. I don't have enough of a stake in this to be mad.
Right, yeah.
But I do really love Matteo Rizzo. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm always happy to see more of him. That's not the choice I would have gone with, but
yeah.
I get it. But yeah, and like what you were saying earlier, I mean, I don't know Anna Pezzetta's skating well enough to really think much about her having won this and getting the nod for Euros. I can only remember seeing her once.
Laura
season.
will be there too.
Well, yeah, and Laura Nakikutmin is obviously the one I'm more excited about just because I've loved her programs this season. I love seeing her get on a podium at the Grand Prix. This is the time when I want to see her really come alive and bring more. So I was kind of disappointed to see her not take the national championships there, but a couple of big competitions ahead still. So winning your own country would be great, but doing well at Europeans or Worlds would be more impressive.
Well, let's talk about some other news in the figure skating landscape that it has happened over the past few weeks that's fairly significant. And if you haven't been online, you haven't seen that we're probably going to have some Russians at the Olympics in 2026. To be specific, the ISU put out a statement basically in layman's terms saying that both Russia and Belarus can each nominate one female, one male, one pair, and one ice dance team for the Olympic qualifying competition happening in the fall of 2025, which essentially means if the nominees qualify at that competition, they will go on to be neutral representatives for not Russia.
Always the ROC or the whatever. Like, we're totes not Russia, but obviously it's Russia. It's such a weird thing.
But they have to, and these terms are all vague, so good luck. They have to not be actively or have shown current support of the war with Ukraine. What that means and how that's perceived is difficult. If they've ever had any kind of military action, they absolutely are disqualified. But I think it basically disqualifies people like the silver medalists in ice dance, for example, from the 2022 Olympic Games, who were seen with the Z on their coats during a military parade. So they're obviously not non-supporters. But you have teams like anyone from Tamara Moscovina's camp in the pairs. Tamara Moscovina wisely has stayed completely out of that, has made no statements, makes it seem like all of her teams should have no problem qualifying, which means the reigning Olympic silver medalists should be able to, if they, are the ones that are nominated, should be back at the Olympic Games going for gold.
I want to say that I have mixed feelings about this, but they're not really mixed. I'm pretty bothered by it. On one level, there are a lot of Russian athletes who I really appreciate and enjoy, and over the years have been a fan of. On another level, it is such a hedged bet from the Olympic Committee to be like, yeah, there's this aggression going on over here, and we've previously said, no, we can't allow you to have anybody involved in the Olympics because your country has waged a completely impromptu war on your neighbor. But now we're going to let a few people leak through. And I don't know. It's just very frustrating. I look at the post that Vadim Kolesnik, who is Ukrainian, has been posting where he's been showing a lot of these other skaters, like you said, having the Z, showing off military service, doing marches with Putin. And also there have been shows that have been specifically war effort appreciation as well. And so anybody who's been involved with those things should be discounted from it. For one thing, I think it makes a lot of the international community pretty uncomfortable. I think it's also going to be pretty strange if we have somebody that nobody has seen for the last 4 years show up at the Olympics and, juiced or not, come in and win the events. I think that will feel pretty uncomfortable for kind of everybody.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be weird. And beyond the war discussion, which is such a humanitarian and personal, and that's its own massive complexity. But taking it just down into the sport after everything that happened with the doping scandals plural, but, most recently the Kamila Valieva scandal, I think people are still extremely scarred by that and don't want people who are known to be doping to come back. So since Kamila Valieva was part of Attiri's camp, does that disqualify anyone who is currently working with Attiri? I don't think so, because we're already seeing Attiri at international events with non-Russian skaters. So to me, that's irrelevant. And we might see, I believe it's Petrosian is her current star of Russia and looks to be the nomination that Russia will provide and who would have scores that could potentially win the women's competition. So it's going to be strange to have that whole situation happening as we've spent the past 4 years watching competition without them.
Yeah.
So I feel so weird about it. I don't know what else to say.
My feeling on these things always comes down to, I hate when the lives, careers, and dreams of individuals are damaged by the political landscape.
Oh, absolutely.
But there are much bigger things than sports out there. And in as much as we need the Olympics to bring people together, it always feels pretty odd when you can say, well, this country is actively killing people somewhere else. And obviously it's not happening just in Ukraine. There are other places in the world where atrocities are being committed and a lot of people could be held accountable for it. But in this very specific case, it feels like it has been adjudicated and then sort of overturned and hedged bets. And that has just happened for Russia over and over again. Like, how many times can you say, well, you can't represent Russia, but you can show up under a different flag and it won't be called Russia, but it'll be called the Russian Olympic Committee or whatever it is. And it's just like, what message are we actually sending here? Everything about that makes me uncomfortable. And I don't like it.
Let's move on. Other news. Ava Marie Ziegler, similar to what you had mentioned about those who we just haven't seen all season, we're not going to because she is out for U.S. nationals. So I'm assuming we'll probably see her at summer competitions going into the Olympic season, but it is a great bummer to have such a surge last season and then to get injured and just sort of be invisible for a full year.
Yeah, the 2-year story for Ava Marie Ziegler has been so unusual because you see her win a surprise Grand Prix event last season, skip U.S. nationals in favor of going to 4 continents.
Did really well at 4 continents. Came in 4th.
Yeah, it did very well. It paid off for her, although it definitely sent one of those shockwaves through the federation and just a strategic move that a lot of people didn't think was a good call. But, what we know now and what we were learning then is that she had a significant, I think, hip issue and that was requiring surgery. And she basically had been told, you get one competition, so take your pick. And she felt that doing it on the international level had a greater opportunity for her. And I think it did. Even though she didn't end up on the podium there, she did very well. Unfortunately, that injury sidelined her for this entire season. We were expecting to see her at nationals. That's not going to happen. And so this season's a wash. What that means for her next season is very up in the air in a American women's division, which has gotten a lot more competitive this season than I think anybody was ready for.
Well, let's finish it up with one really wonderful piece of news, which is that Deanna Stellato-Dudek is officially a Canadian citizen.
Yeah, and being a Canadian looks great on her.
She looked amazing at her swearing-in ceremony. Just putting it out there. She was in red dress, totally living her best Canadian life. Could not be more thrilled for Miss Deanna for being now eligible to go to the Olympic Games.
Also, Allison Reed, I don't know if we talked about this on a previous episode.
We briefly did, but yes, she is now a Lithuanian citizen, so she and Salius Ambrulevicius can now go to the Olympics for Lithuania.
Yeah, so a really fantastic outcome for both of those skaters who have represented those countries very well on the international stage. And I think are very deserving, they and their partners, of being able to realize that Olympic dream for those countries. So very exciting for both of them. I think that wraps it up for us on this one. I know it's really kind of a hodgepodge, but it's just kind of where we're at in the middle of the season. When we come back in the next episode, we're going to talk about Korean nationals. I think it's just wrapped up at the time we've recorded this. And just kind of seeing where that federation is at, because I think they're at a pretty interesting place overall. Maybe not where we would have thought they would be and look at a few other bits and pieces of skating stories that have come out as we get ready for U.S. nationals here soon, and then these other huge international competitions.
Europeans, 4 continents.
Worlds, yeah.
Worlds.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Can't
there's a
believe
lot coming up in the next few weeks. And also some other lesser known, but also still significant international competitions that really matter for a lot of the skaters who won't make it to those big events, and particularly are going to be where people are trying to get their international scores to qualify for the Olympic season and stuff. So there's definitely a lot coming up, but for now, that's where we're going to check out on it.
So yeah, give us a shout on any kind of the socials or on YouTube, and let us know what you've been watching, and if there's anything we missed that you really think we should go back and take a look at. But until then,
for Choreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.